I don't need a new army. I don't need a new army. I don't need a new army. I'm going to buy a new army. Welcome to another episode of the weekly wrap-up. This is a series where I cover the latest goings on in the world of Warhammer, as well as things that I've been doing in this hobby over the past week. First up, we had Warhammer Day yesterday, where we celebrated Warhammer turning 35 years old. The Warhammer team went through a lot of previews live on Twitch, and I did watch the whole thing, so let's talk about some of the highlights from there. First and foremost, Astra Militarum are getting their entire range, which a lot of people have been expecting, but the range is being refreshed, and they taught us through some of the first releases. I've been trying to resist already picking up Astra Militarum, or the Guard as it used to be known. I think this is pushing me over the edge. I've got way too much already with this Kill Team box I picked up last week. I've got the dwarves to build, I've got my towel to paint, but I've always felt the models for this range were a little bit behind. So when I got into the hobby, I loved the lore and the aesthetic of the Imperial Guard, basically, because it's humankind just being thrown into the grind machine against aliens and just like these brute space marines who've turned to chaos. And I love the idea that it's just a numbers game. It's like you just keep throwing infantry in, and they do pretty good considering they're just regular men and women who are fighting these horrors that exist in the 41st millennium. They announced this box, so Cadia Stands, which is like an army, well, it is an army set. So I guess like the Leagues of Votan box I picked up, and it just looks absolutely incredible. As a new player, it got me thinking about things I haven't even thought of before. So, you know, the chainsword here, yes, he's holding it with one hand, but it looks like he would be slugging it with two hands. He probably isn't wielding it around like a space marine does. And then you go through to this guy with a plasma rifle where he's got like two hands, and it looks like it's pretty heavy. It really helps put proportions into size of how big the space marines are for me, and how these guys are doing everything they can to fight their own war, and they have to face the same enemies that Space Marines do, but they don't have those physical advantages that they do. So I absolutely love this entire range, and I suspect the price will be similar to the Votan box, so like £100 basically, $200. I think for that price I have to pick it up. I've been on the edge of picking it up for a while. I was so pleased I picked the dwarves up, even though I've not fully finished building the box yet. I'm pretty close. Getting something like this where over time I can always build out the Imperial Guard while I build, finish other things like my towel painting and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to be picking these up, even though I don't need a new army. I just couldn't be happy with how this looks. Let's move on, because a lot more was announced. They announced the Lord Invocatus, I guess it's called. So for those that don't know, the World Eaters are getting their own standalone launch next year. So it's the same treatment Thousand Suns had, where they were part, I understand I'm pretty new to the hobby, but I think they were part of the original like Chaos Codex, and then they were popular enough to have their own like off-sprout, just like a lot of Space Marines do with the Dark Angels and so on and so on. This is a new model, a new HQ, as I understand, for the army, and you've got to give it to the Warhammer team. They absolutely smash it out of the park with these models. I mean, I just want one of everything, and this is where they do such a good job. The detail on these miniatures is just absolutely next level. And from what I understand, there will be a couple of build options. So I don't think it's at the top, but basically the thing he's riding, which looks completely mechanical. You can like change out the shoulder pads, so he almost looks like a battering ram. Oh yeah, there you go, look. So we've got like this style here where it's almost more like a rhino than a wolf or a dog, whereas this looks a lot more speedy and athletic. So I'll probably end up picking so much more up next year. So much to do, so much to buy, so much to paint. But this is the hobby we're in, right? So I loved that reveal. Next up, we had the Arks of Omen, which, from what I can gather, it's basically the next narrative part of Warhammer. So it's going to be its own series of books. it looks like it's where the whole story arc for Warhammer 40,000 is going next. And long story short, Abaddon, in his quest to burn the universe and wipe out all of the Imperium and the Loyalists, he's got these arcs, which are the Space Hawks. Abaddon has got a bunch of these, and he's scouring them for relics, which will help his quest, his crusade. This is all about to be revealed in a series of new books. It looks like they considered adjusting the game and how it's played, but they've heard the feedback from the community that we don't want to take 15 different books to a game just to play and have all these different things to reference. So I think it's mostly about the story arc. They keep talking about something called boarding actions, which I'm pretty confused about, to be honest. Again, probably just because I'm a newer player, but it sounds like a bigger version of Kill Team. Basically, we'll come on to that next, but they've shown off a preview where they're all fighting in hallways and tight confined spaces, and they've emphasized the fact that they're not releasing a whole update for the main Warhammer 40k game, the big Warhammer, as a lot of people call it, but they're instead releasing this boarding action style game. So we'll have to see what's revealed when more details come up there. And they did give a preview talking through things that would be in the new boarding action setup, but for me it looks like a larger version of Kill Team, where they revealed this terrain, which is released into the Dark box set here. So maybe it's expanding on that. We'll have to see what comes out of it. I'll probably try it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it is at the moment. The final piece of news were a couple of new kill teams being released. So basically, we've got the Carcerin, who are the guard, basically, and the Cryptek kill teams, obviously for the Necrons. So these look interesting. Again, really high detail miniatures. I can see a lot of people just picking these up just because of how amazing they look, especially so they can be used alongside the new Imperial Guard once that releases properly. But these just look absolutely fantastic. And we go down, and these guys, the Cryptarchs, they are there on these Space Hawks looking for relics. So, you know, the Necrons have finally woken up after millennia in slumber, and they've realized a lot of their relics have been stolen over time. So they're looking on these Space Hawks to reacquire relics and just take them back, basically. So I thought this looked great, and this, as far as I'm aware, is a new unit, so I'm sure that will get its own data sheet, which will make it into the larger 40k game as well at some point. But yeah, this looked great, to be honest. I only just picked this Cult Team box up, haven't played a single game yet, haven't even opened the box yet. So I'm sure at some point I'll check this out, but for the moment, for me, it's just something great to look at, but I won't be diving into that. The second thing that happened this week was this Metawatch article. They also streamed this and talked through, and I thought this was really, really helpful. As, again, somebody new to the game, I guess a lot of people experience what I did experience, where I was almost paralyzed on what army to choose at the start, because you don't want to pick something that's weak and feel like you spend all this time building and painting these miniatures and put a lot of love and care into building them, and you're so proud of them once they're there. And you don't then want to go to a game and just feel like you don't even have a chance, like you just can't compete. This article that they released was basically talking through that. They want anybody getting into Warhammer to feel like they can compete with any other army out there. And they're basically looking at tournaments as a good place to take data from, and saying as long as armies are within a 5% difference, 45 to 55% win rate, they're happy. There are a couple of armies that are below that line and a couple that are above it at the moment. So this chart that they released, Tyranids and Harlequins are too high with their win rate, so they should expect nerfs coming in the next few weeks. And then basically Space Marines, as well as the Adeptus Mechanicus, are too weak. Space Marines, I think, is interesting because they are the army that most beginners play when they get into Warhammer, and the number of players who play the army compared to all others out there is just huge. So you've got people of wildly different skill levels going to these tournaments as well, And so it's challenging to look at them and say, okay, they've got a 39% win rate when the skill levels aren't comparable, really. The Adeptus Mechanicus is, and that's fair enough, they are underpowered right now and will be getting a buff by the sounds of it. But it's actually great to see this chart together, just to see where everybody lies. I did find it interesting to see the Warhammer team covering things that I've wondered about as well since starting the hobby. For example, I've never even seen anybody playing Genestealer cults. I've never even seen Genestealer cults in the gaming center I play, Element Games in Stockport, which is huge, it's very popular, and I've not even seen them. So if I was to face them for a first time in the tournament without doing a little bit of research on how they play, I wouldn't really know how to counter them. And I've always wondered how that factors into win and loss ratios when you go to these sorts of things. And on the flip side, everybody knows how Space Marines play because a lot of us face them or have our own armies, so we know they typically have like a 3-up save. We know how bolters work, we know the ranges they have, so they're a little bit easier to face and to counter because we loosely know how they all play. So they covered that and said they have considered that in their rankings and will be factoring that in going forwards. So this for me was just a really great article to see that they, although they don't have all the answers yet, they are focused on making it a very fair and fun game to play. And I'm just really excited to be in this hobby at this time because it feels like 8th, from what I hear, was a great addition and people loved the simplicity of it. 9th, I know a lot of people don't like the complexity of things like the terrain and things like that. I personally love it, but it's my first experience of Warhammer, so I don't know any different. And I can't wait to see where they take it in 10th. I do feel like with the announcements yesterday, 10th edition is around the corner, at least from being announced, around the corner being maybe the start of next year, right? Like we need the Imperial Guard to get their codex release first, but that will be the last one. And so I think this narrative campaign with the Arks of Omen, that will take us through so we don't have this drought with the story and like interesting codexes to read. That will take us through to the 10th edition release. So I'm so happy with things right now. The final thing I've had my eye on this week is Golden Demon, which happened last weekend, I think it was. I really wanted to go to this, but had other plans, so I couldn't make it happen. Even though I'm not a talented painter myself, I absolutely love seeing the art and skill that people put into these miniatures in a hobby we all love. So I was watching things on different streams, I was watching a few different YouTube channels cover these miniatures in a lot of detail. And then when this article released, I've just been clicking through and just having a look at the quality in some of these miniatures and dioramas. I won't talk through each one in this video. There were a few highlights for me. The first one was this like Nurgle ogre, and I've never seen anything like this. Why do they only have basically humans or demons? They don't have, or as far as I've seen, they don't have these lumbering ogres or Tau or anything like that, but I assume all of those different things do have a place in a Death Guard army. So I was thinking like maybe Poxwalkers could look like this with a bit of conversion and so on. So I loved seeing these models. The squad, when I was looking at that, I thought the one that won was pretty interesting and obviously very well deserved. The one that really stood out for me is these Orc Commandos going through a jungle environment. I thought they looked great and gave it a lot of theme and interest around these commandos sneaking in to do what they need to do to infiltrate the back lines. Next up we have the vehicles, and again, look at this thing. I don't even know how you get to the level of skill these guys are at where they have these imaginations to even conceptualize these things and then turn it into reality. I've looked at these for a long time now, just absolutely blown away by how good they look. And yeah, I would love to see some of these at the next Golden Demon. Again, I won't go through all of these. I'll put the link in the description, so I would encourage you to just go and take a look at the incredible artwork that these people have put in just to make these models that look absolutely incredible and just further our hobby, making it a really interesting place to be. So that wraps up a busy week in Warhammer. These are just 3 things that I found interesting, but I would encourage you to go through to the Warhammer community website and just scroll through. It's such an interesting time to be in the hobby, and I can't wait to see where we go over the next few months as we lead up to the new Imperial Guard release, and then next year with Khorne and everything else that's coming. Thank you so much for watching again, and I'll see you in the next one.